Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel today. We're going to do a show review today. A show that I recently finished season 1 of. I don't want to introduce it anyway other than by doing this. Let's watch the intro for the show. Okay. Uh, I mean, a top 10 intro for a show all time, I will say. The music is a huge hit in this show, and I would say is an important part of the show. The soundtrack is really phenomenal. The way that the intro gets, and not the intro, but like the soundtrack for the season sort of escalates some of the tension that we see throughout the season in a very enjoyable way. Um, so, yeah. And like sets the tone very well for the show. The artwork is very calming, it's very idyllic, but then like there's the jellyfish eating the fish whole. The guys in the boat are having to ride this big wave up. So we sort of have this idea of like it's calm and idyllic and also trending towards something bad is going to happen, which it does. I am a mental health professional, not a professional YouTuber. So spoilers ahead, because my ADHD brain sometimes moves faster than uh, I think it will. And then I say things that should be covered by spoilers. So this is full of spoilers. So if you haven't watched it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, stop watching. The show is a satire. It's a black comedy. Um, it's an uncomfortable watch, I found. I definitely laughed out loud. I think probably every episode. Um, but also like was stressed watching it because of some of the social interactions in the show are just deeply uncomfortable. But like not in like a satirical way, like the UK version of The Office, which like is laugh out loud funny even through its cringy moments. Like as someone who's an introvert and as someone who works in a service industry, not really service industry, I'm healthcare technically, but like has clients and like yeah, I don't know. A lot of the like little in between social norms that the show sort of pokes fun at are legitimately uncomfortable because they're uncomfortable in real life. So I thought as a satire, it worked really well. Overall, the acting in the show is really phenomenal. The soundtrack is phenomenal. The show is very well made. And the themes it's poking fun at, the satire, what it's trying to skewer is predominantly white Western privilege, but Paula as a character is not white and also engages in some of the privilege. So I think there's also like a class consciousness to the show, just as far as like what privilege um, comes with wealth. And when you're afforded that status, even if it's not your own wealth, how that affects things. So we sort of have these different groups of people. We have Shane and Rachel, who are newlyweds coming to the resort on their honeymoon. We have Tanya, who is coming to spread the ashes of her mother. Um, and then we have the Mossbacher family, who are just on a regular vacation, it seems. Um, the mom is a CEO and a very successful businesswoman. The dad is concerned he has cancer, uh, which isn't funny that someone is concerned they have cancer. Just his storyline is, in particular, quite humorous. Their two kids have a son and a daughter, and they have the daughter has brought a friend from college along on this family trip, which, like, I was watching the show with my wife, and I never experienced that. I never went on a trip, not like an overnight or like destination trip with friends, but my wife did. My wife traveled with her best friend and their family, so that was interesting. Just sort of like, oh yeah, like both my wife and I grew up poor, so like, just sort of like reflecting on some of those differences and the status that comes with like traveling with another family if that family is in a different class or has some different privilege than you do, which is what Paula, the friend, has because she's not white, but she's traveling with the Mossbacher family who are white and wealthy. And so she is included in that class um, and has a lot of their privilege because of it, even though she correctly points out the privilege of the different Mossbachers. Um, double checking the name. So part of the reason I dislike doing reviews of shows or movies is because as a neurodivergent person, I'm really bad with names. Uh, and also like in real life, just bad with faces too. I'm bad at people, I guess. I definitely have some face blindness and I just forget people's names. Okay, Olivia is the other, is the daughter. Um, the other recurring characters in the show that are very important, eh, some of them are important, are the staff at the White Lotus resort. So, um, yeah, that's kind of like what moves the story along is the staff. But we have Armand, who's the main non-guest character. Um, but it's really interesting. So the show is skewering uh, privilege, predominantly white privilege, but definitely wealth and the privilege that comes with being wealthy. And these characters are all kind of awful and unlikable, except for the staff. But the staff is having to deal with everybody else's nonsense. And so you're sort of like on the staff side, specifically Armand's side, until you realize like he's also an awful person. So it's one of those shows, and I think this is a newer thing in media where just like nobody's likable. Um, I we recently got HBO after not having it for a long time because streaming services have just reinvented cable, but worse. So I just like we're gonna get a bonus review of the show Barry in here, but I finished Barry, um, the HBO show with Bill Hader as a assassin who takes acting classes. But like none of the characters in that show are likable, and so when the show ends, you're just kind of like, "Meh, I don't know that that needed to exist." Um, which is not the feeling I got from White Lotus. Again, I think as a satire, it worked really well. I will get into some of the criticism I have of the show for like skewering some of this stuff in our modern society, but then doing the same exact thing. But like maybe that's a meta commentary and is also part of the satire. I'm open to that, especially because I haven't watched seasons 2 or 3, and it seems like people still really enjoyed the show. So hoping that the quality of it stays high, and the satire stays high because I like a good satire. I like a good black comedy for sure. So yeah, every character is just kind of up their own ass. Um, Shane is the worst, I will say, in my personal ranking of characters I like the least. Shane's the worst. Um, just like wealthy frat guy, has done nothing of note in his life, but is super privileged about everything because he grew up wealthy. And like, dude nails it as the character, the actor who plays him, um, just crushes it. Like he's unlikable from the get go. He's there on his honeymoon and he's mad that the booking is wrong. And like, that's the plot of the show. Shane's mad that they got the wrong room. And his new wife, Rachel, played by Alexandra Daddario, is perturbed at like why he can't just let it go. And so we have kind of the clearest, I don't know if it's the clearest. We have a very clear example of the class consciousness here where Rachel did not grow up so wealthy. And so she just can't get into Shane's mindset. And he like can't understand why she's being so dense about like, you married me and I have money. So now you have money. So like you just get to do whatever you want because we have money. Um, so Shane gets into it with Armand, and like that drives the show. And like that's sort of where you get on Armand's side because he's dealing with Shane. But like in episode one, so we're moving into spoilers here. In episode one, we already know Armand's not a good dude because his first sort of existential break is not because the people visiting the White Lotus are terrible. It seems like he's very used to that, and that's the normal part of his job. It's that Lonnie, one of the new staff members, was pregnant. Her water broke, and she starts giving birth while on a shift, and Armand never noticed. Like, she's in labor, she's in pain, and he's just like, why is your shirt stained? And so, like, he doesn't notice. And so, this sort of like that contributes to Armand's sort of fall throughout the show. But so we're given this idea that Armand is not a good dude, but he seems to genuinely be bothered by the fact that he didn't notice the plight of his workers. And then we get on Armand's side because Shane's so terrible. So like later, Armand books Shane and Rachel on a quote unquote romantic getaway, but it's on the same boat as Tanya, who's gonna pour her mother's ashes and just be sobbing and crying the whole time. And you're like, good for Armand, because Shane sucks. And we're glad that Shane has to deal with this. Good one, Armand. You got one over on Shane. We love you for it. But then Armand starts doing drugs, and really the worst of his personality traits come out, which is not an uncommon thing when people do drugs. Um, yeah, he starts like taking advantage of his staff and putting them in unwinnable situations and just abusing his power. And like, right. So he's just also kind of like, again, it's this interplay of like they're all staff and they're underneath the guests. They have less privilege than the guests, but Armand, as the manager, has more power than some of the other workers, which he takes advantage of because he wants to have sex when he's on drugs. So it's icky, and he's not a good guy. And also, you sort of like can root for him because of how terrible Shane is. Shane and Rachel don't provide like a ton of humor. Shane's just kind of like awful to her, and she is just questioning everything in her life. So her like character arc isn't a lot. She's a writer and she's coming to grips with like she married into wealth, which means she doesn't have to work anymore. But like the work she did was like listicle articles. So she's not real proud of that and she wants more. Kind of the main interaction she has in the show is like Mama Mossbacher. What is her? Nicole. Nicole Mossbacher, who's the super successful CEO, big name in the business world. Rachel, as a writer, has already written about her. So they have an interaction where like Rachel's like processing, like, did I make a mistake? What should I do? I married into wealth. And Nicole's sort of like, maintain your independence. So stay a writer because whatever happens, you signed a prenup. So you're not getting that money. And that seems like very poignant to Rachel. And then she's like, oh, I wrote about you. And then Nicole kind of sours on her as like, you're the worst. And then this leads to like all this gossip in the resort. All the guests in the resort end up gossiping about each other, which is like, I don't know. I think how humans work realistically, because many people don't really mature past what our social status was in high school and like the social dynamics, just like I don't know. It's a lot of in-group, out-group dynamics, but like a lot of people don't really mature much at all. It would be great if most of us were not like our 18-year-old selves. So, but yeah, like Rachel doesn't have a lot beyond that. Shane continues to complain. He calls his mom to complain for him. Just like eye roll inducing, and then is like big fan of his travel agent because he's a real go-getter. And so, like, yeah, Shane's relationships are all seem to be based on like who is productive in getting him what he wants. And then like his mom flies to the resort, which is just like the one of the cringiest parts of the show where she's like, "Oh, I don't mean to crash your honeymoon." But she's like definitely crashing their honeymoon. Rachel is deeply uncomfortable, even though she keeps sort of doing the nice thing. Rachel says she's from New York, but I think Rachel as a character would have worked really well if she was from the Midwest because she's got the Midwest vibe. She just needed like a more Midwest accent, I think. Would have, take somebody from Fargo and put him in the show. Fargo, North Dakota, but also Fargo, the show. Just that Midwestern, nice, being polite through the awkwardness would have worked well for Rachel's character, I think. So that's sort of like Shane and Rachel. Shane catches Armand in a tryst with one of his employees, and then Shane's like, got him. So finally he's gonna get the things he wants. Armand has to put him in the room that he's wanted this whole time, and like Shane's still unhappy with it. So Shane's the worst. Shane is like the very easy, obvious, like wealthy twat in the show, of a show about wealthy twats. Like they're all not great, but I think Shane is just like the most obviously deeply unlikable. Um, the Mossbachers are a bit of a mixed bag because of all the characters who I say are like pretty unlikable. I'll end up liking Quinn the most. He's coded neurodivergent, so I'm probably biased, but he also denies being, well, they refer to him as having Asperger's, which again would just be autism spectrum disorder now. Asperger's is not a separate diagnosis anymore. Um, but yeah, he seems weird, but like he seems to navigate his family's privilege and awkwardness and general terribleness the most, although he participates in it and takes advantage of it with no real analysis, unlike his sister, who like is deeply critical of their privilege and also participates in it and is fine with it, and her friend Paula, who is deeply critical of it but also participates in it. So like we have all these not great characters. Quinn's the best, I think. um yeah, so what is it, Mark? See, this is where I'm terrible with names. Nicole Mossbacher is Mama. Quinn is the kid, the boy who's the best. Olivia is the sister, and Mark. Yep, Mark. Look at me. I remembered a name. I have looked at the cast list so many times to try and prep for this video so I wouldn't forget anybody's names. Mark is concerned he has testicular cancer. There's like a weird. I grew up in purity culture and didn't get sex ed because talking about sex was so terrible in the fundamentalist evangelical group I was raised in. But like, I'm a sex positive person. I'm a marriage therapist. We talk about sex all the time because sex and money are the number one and number two things that get couples to come to therapy. So like, try to not be a prude in spite of my upbringing. But like, Mark's talking about his swollen testicles in front of his college aged kid and her college aged friend, which I was like, don't do that. But it's like it's humorous in the show. It's but like also weird. Mark's a weird guy. He and Nicole seem to like coexist. It comes out at one point that he had an affair and like she's never really moved past it, but like she forgave him because he bought her some $75,000 bracelets with his own money instead of their shared money, which is mostly her money. But he goes on a bender. He finds out he does not have cancer. Hooray. But then he's like, wait, my dad died of cancer, but I can't remember what kind of cancer. It just was always said that he had cancer. So he calls an uncle. Then he finds out he doesn't have cancer. The uncle calls him back. He's elated, right? He doesn't have cancer. And the uncle's like, your dad didn't have cancer. He had AIDS. And like, Mark's like, but how did he get AIDS? And the uncle obviously is like, he was gay. So Mark's on this vacation and he finds out that like his dad was leading this double life and like it sends him into a tailspin. He gets drunk. That's when he tells Quinn about the affair, his son about the affair and all these things. He's trying to have like this relationship with Quinn that he didn't have with his dad because his dad died when he was young, but he's like processing things in real time. So he's just doing a terrible job of it. He's not like the worst character, um, because that's Shane, but he's really terrible in a lot of like specific white dude ways. Um, just when like Olivia, uh, just having to double check that it is, in fact, yeah, Olivia and Paula have a lot of their criticisms about like wealth and like privilege in society. The Mossbacher parents are like they're like white Gen X, maybe disliking Trump but still voting Republican talking points, and like, ugh, yuck, they're gross. Um, so yeah, Mark's like not very likable. What sort of works in through all of this is Paula hears about these expensive bracelets. She's been hooking up with one of the workers at the hotel who's a native to the island. The resort came in and like took their land because that's what colonizers are going to do. Paula's very much like, fuck colonization. It's the worst. And then is like, here, she does the white savior thing, even though she's not white, which is like, here, you break into the room while we're out on a trip, steal these bracelets. They're each worth $75,000. Then you guys can pay for lawyers to sue the resort and get your land back. So, like, she's an ally, but she's doing the white savior thing and also not taking any risks of her own. She's like, here, Kai, I'm sleeping with you. And also, you do this. Like, aren't I doing a great thing by letting you know that you can break the law for your own? Like, I don't know. She's just like, in the same way that Olivia is, both of those characters are like saying the right stuff, but they don't know how to apply it. Which is the thing that, like, again, as satire works, is like sadly realistic, though, especially I think for a lot of like people who were comfortable under neoliberalism, that like white people who are like, "Oh, this is really terrible. America's turning fascist," without realizing that like America's been a fascist police state for a long time if you weren't white. So I think a lot of people are coming to this sort of realization, and like I've said this in other videos and talked about it on the podcast, like white people, like other people, have been fighting the systems and engaging in activism for a long time. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And like, I'll be honest, right? Like, I came out of high control religion and like everything seemed sort of new and wonderful. And like, I wanted to do it and sort of had to learn how to like chill out, step back. Other people know more about this and have been doing this for longer than you have. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I do have a bit of that reinvent the wheel, not from, I mean, I'm sure some of it's from white privilege. I'm not going to dismiss that entirely, but for being neurodivergent and just sort of like my brain naturally is like, no, the way everybody tells me how it should work is not how my brain wants it to work. So I think that's a neurodivergent thing. Definitely don't have privilege from growing up the way I grew up, because I grew up very poor. Both my parents are teachers um, at religious schools, which tremendously underpay their workers and take advantage of them in some really gross ways. Fun. Um, so yeah, where was I? Paula and taking advantage of Kai. So like, yeah, doing the white savior thing. Where that affects Mossbacher parents is Kai, of course, is going to break into the room to steal the bracelets. Obviously, Nicole leaves the boat trip they're going to go on, and Mark comes back and saves her. Kai was just telling her to like shut up and stay down on the ground while he continues the robbery. Mark Mossbacher comes in, Daddy Mossbacher comes in and tackles him, and then gets beat up. He gets punched in the face a bunch of times, but that like endears him to Nicole. So then they have sex on their vacation, and like all is well in the world, question mark, question mark, question mark. Kai gets arrested. So Paula feels so much shame and guilt around this. Olivia is like, I knew you were sleeping with somebody and you didn't tell me, because they have this whole history of Olivia stealing Paula's boyfriends or hookups or whatever. So like, again, they say the right things but don't know how to do it, and then like they make up and are just fine, similar to how Mossbacher parents make up and are just fine. Like, the satire of the show is like, and for the wealthy people, life goes on, but for the lower working class, the shit they pull deeply affects them and ruins their lives sometime. So, yeah, where this all sort of comes to a head is like Rachel and Shane are going to split. Shane's losing his mind, but he has the room that he wants. Armand has been doing drugs, but is going to lose his job because of Shane, and also sleeping with his other employees and using drugs and time off to exploit them. So really not great. Armand goes in, breaks into the room so that he can shit into Shane's suitcase, which like again, we know that at this point Armand is not a great character, but like on his way out, it is again, we can all root for like fuck Shane. So poops in the suitcase and then like gets caught in the room awkwardly, and Shane ends up stabbing Armand and killing him. So we knew someone was gonna die. That's how the show opens. So sort of wraps that up. And then, like, just a gut punch at the end of season one is Rachel shows up to the airport. She wasn't in the opening scene. So we thought maybe she really did leave Shane, but like, she's like, no, let's make it work. I promise I'll be happy with you. I'm like, it's icky. And like, as a marriage therapist, I can say pretty confidently they don't stay together. Obviously, they're fictional characters, but like, nah, that marriage doesn't work. Um, so yeah, that's the episode. We don't get much from Kai, who's again the native to the island, and like there's not a lot of character development there. He's arrested and we don't see him again. Lonnie, we don't hear from again at all. She was working through her pregnancy and didn't tell anyone she's pregnant because she needed the job. So like we have all these things where the show, spoilers for season two, continues as we know Tanya comes back to the island. So Tanya was there to spread her mother's ashes. She like super gloms on to Belinda, who works in the spa. Belinda is deeply skeptical, but also polite and kind to Tanya. Tanya takes her to dinner and is like, you should open your own wellness center. I'll pay for it. And Belinda like puts it off and puts it off, and then is finally like, all right, I guess I'm going to get my hopes up about this, only to have them dashed because Tanya's also terrible. Tanya gloms onto Belinda, and then she hooks up with the guy who's in the room next to her, and then like she gloms onto that guy. She's a glommer, and makes her whole life about this thing. So then she's not doing anything with Belinda, and just like an apology, just gives her a wad of cash, like an envelope full of cash, but like not start a business amount of cash. Still like a seemingly large sum of money though. Um, as therapists, we're not allowed to take more than $25 of a gift. So occasionally on the way out, a client will buy me a record because I have a record player in the office. Um, and that's nice, but we don't get wads of cash. But I don't like being touched by strangers or touching strangers. So no way would I ever work in a spa for better tips. Um, and again, if there's anything the show sort of shows is like, man, service industry, no, thank you. Working with people is the worst. Um, and like I don't know, that's again like just a it's not a great it's not great. And like Belinda knows better. She talks to I think it was her son on the phone who's like, yo, get that money, like the system's fucked. If you can get cash, like do it, whatever you need to do it. Like if the guests say jump, you say how high, because if that's going to pay for it, you do you. So like again, there's just like an awareness of like the system is fucked and also like not great. And like, hey, if you're gonna participate, if you're gonna exist under capitalism, might as well like get that bag. And I sort of get that, like I think for a lot of folks that I see, um, none of us are happy about existing under capitalism. I see a lot of left leaning or like leftist folks. Like nobody likes capitalism, and also you have to pay your bills. Like it's shitty. It makes you set aside your morals and ethics sometimes. And it's just sort of like this question of like how much, right? Like I have merch available to buy because like I don't know, I got to pay my bills. It doesn't pay my bills. I can tell you that. Doing therapy does, which I like to do. But it's like just all these passive streams of income are things you're supposed to do to get ahead. Like, I don't know, buy merch. I don't have a retirement account set up for myself. So there's no plan here. A millennial existing in late stage capitalism. So yeah, I don't know. Buy a fanny pack. Um I hate the car salesman stuff of it all. Um So yeah, that sort of wraps season one. Tanya leaves without investing in the business. She does finally spread her mother's ashes as after several failed attempts. Um, she's an alcoholic. Armand's doing drugs. Like there's some themes of substance use in here, in a way where like again it doesn't affect Tanya at all, but it does affect Armand because he dies. So again, like definitely a class consciousness commentary as far as like the wealthy people get to be terrible people and nothing bad happens to them, and for the working class folks who are terrible people, like bad things happen to them, and for the ones who stay in line and don't rock the boat too aggressively, like they just keep continuing struggling to make ends meet. So yeah, it's like an entertaining watch, but like it's not it doesn't have a nice ending. Again, like it's filmed is where it's like a good satire in my opinion, is it's filmed as if like there's some happy endings at the end of season 1. But like Rachel coming back to Shane is like not good. Quinn does abandon the Mossbachers at the end. Um, Quinn loses his phone in the season because he sleeps outside and it's washed away because his sister refuses to let him sleep in their room. Um, and but then he's like outside when the sun rises and he sees a whale and that's really cool. And then he runs into these guys who are like trying to paddle across to the big island or like set some record with their boat. And like Quinn's like just loves this and joins them. And like I'm gonna say unrealistically is like his muscles would be sore and unusable and he'd have such bad blisters and such bad sunburn. So that part was unrealistic. But like also as somebody who has ADHD and is very stimulated being around water, like I love paddling, stand up paddleboard. It's like my happy place when it's nice out. So I'm in the Midwest, Wisconsin, and there's only like 3 months of the year that I get to do this. But like, yeah, I don't know. I get it. I can be out on the water all day and not deal with anything else and be pretty happy about it. So yeah, I'm biased to enjoy Quinn as the character because yeah. Um there's just like no good relationships. The Mossbacher relationship isn't good. The friendship between Olivia and um in my head, what I'm doing right now is like, it starts with a V. It doesn't. It's Paula. Um, that's why I'm bad at names. Olivia and Paula are not good relationships. Um, Armand and his coworkers are not good relationships. Shane and Rachel is obviously awful. Tanya and the dude she's hooking up with, not good. He's lying to her like the whole time he's with her. Although they do seem to be there. They show up in season 2, at least for part of it, because they're in the little thumbnails for season 2. So not sure what happens there, but starts off with a lie, and Tanya just gloms on in a very codependent sort of way. So yeah, there's nothing good going on in this show. It really skewers pretty effectively like the privilege that comes with wealth, and also that like, and the wealthy people suffer no consequences. So that sucks. I guess it's good Luigi's out there for all of us. Uh, rip. This is why I'm algorithm unfriendly. Perhaps there's a revolution brewing. The French figured it out a couple 100 years ago. So wealth inequality is bad. We should be working to end that. But yeah, The White Lotus is a good watch. I very much enjoyed it. My wife and I don't struggle to find shows we enjoy, but generally enjoy different things about the shows that we watch. And this one was like a good watch for both of us. We finished it in 2 nights. I think it's 6 episodes. The episodes are hour long. So we breezed through season 1. Um, so it's good, like I give it as a satire, as a black comedy. It is worth a watch. It's well done. We will continue watching seasons 2 and 3, and I'm sure I'll hop back on with some thoughts on those things. So, capitalistic hellscape, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps people find me. I don't get money from this. But hey, maybe I'll someday reach enough subscribers to get some ad money, and that'll be cool. Um, Really though, the whole driver of the channel is that people see how I interact and talk and think about things, and they decide they want to do therapy with me, and that is how I pay my bills. So it does help that people can find me, especially because I swear and talk about things that the algorithm doesn't like. So, liking and subscribing helps. If there's something you want me to talk about or review, a song. I like to do breakup songs. That's helpful. If you want more of me than just here on the YouTube channel, I also have a podcast, which is titled Your Therapist Needs Therapy, where I talk to mental health professionals about how they take care of their own mental health. So that's fun. That's what most of the merch is. It's for the podcast. So yeah, you know, engage in capitalism for free if you like by liking and subscribing or commenting. Okay. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Don't get murdered on a fancy resort. Peace.